Hello and good morning. Valeria and myself, Geraldine, are going to be chatting about a series of blog posts that we have recently posted, which is all about why buildings are becoming information systems. So we started with the first comment or blog post was about reframing the conversation around buildings being very much more than physical assets, that they are in fact very dependent now on information to function, and how this is changing the way in which the design and construction and the maintenance and operations, the facility sides of the industry, is performing. So Valley and I are just going to chat informally between each other, talking about some of these issues. So Valley, what are you thinking in terms of some of these blogs you've written and how they've operated and impact us?
Hello, everyone. I'm Valeria. Hi, Geraldine. So, what I think is that the industry is shifting, and more, we can see that shift going from models into the information rather than the geometry. So, what we're seeing today is that BIM has traditionally been treated as a modeling tool, but now, with AI coming super strong in the industry, we can see that information is key, and we are getting away from geometry more and more, and we are building like information models rather than geometry-based models, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, but the industry is somewhat slow to appreciate how important the information is, because historically the industry's generated a 2D drawing output, which is not information independent. So now to be able to generate information and move the information from design through construction and on into the facilities maintenance and operation world in a seamless transfer, it sort of imposes on the design and construction industry a new set of criteria and structure, which is very rigorous, that they have to comply with.
Yes, I agree. I think that that has to do a lot with the fact that human beings do not like change. We are resistant to change, like inherently. So I think the industry is used in working in a certain way. It has been used in like working in a certain way for a really, really long time. And now we are in the middle of the change, in the shift, and everybody is like super scared of letting go of their old workflows. Especially they're scared of like being liable, right? So what is happening nowadays is some of the issues that we've been flagging along this post and along some blogs that we did previously is that information is being requested more often and more rigorously than ever before in the models. Um, and what happens is that a lot of projects are asking for BIM and asking for some information, but then the information is inconsistent, is not structured, or is incomplete. And that's a big problem that we're having right now because the deliverable at the end is actually, yes, we did it, we checked every box that you asked from us, but at the end, the information is still unusable, right? Or useless if it's not structured and well defined.
Do you think part of the problem is that owners are not defining very clearly for the design and construction team exactly what it is that needs to be provided, in that, the actual requirements are too loose? They talk about a level of development, but they don't really talk about the necessary information that's got to be associated and attached to that level of geometry that's getting created. And so there isn't really a plan in place on how they're going to build the required data sets that are really needed to drive all these downstream digital uses that could be much more automated.
Yes, absolutely. I think that the resistance to change is not only for the design and construction teams, it's also for the owner because this is something new for them as well, right? Like they are not used to thinking so much ahead in their projects. And sometimes we find also that the facility maintenance and operation teams are not brought into the conversation early on. They are usually left for the very end, and that hinders a little bit the process of creating BIM requirements that actually benefits the facility maintenance and operation teams if they are not involved before design happens, right? So it's a learning curve for everyone, the owner, the designers, and the construction trades GC teams. But for sure, what you should say about the fact that the first step into building this structured data set that actually works by handover and to support the life cycle of the building is certainly for the owner to have clear, well-defined BIM requirements early on before design happens, before even like the design team is appointed, so that everybody understand what is needed, what information has value, and then push throughout design and construction to have that information that has value for the owner produced, validated, and structured so that they can receive it at the end.
I guess that's the other problem as well, isn't it? Is that the design team really isn't used to having to have all this information validated. And really, what we're seeing as a handover to the owners from, some BIM processes is that the data, it's inconsistent, it's incomplete, it's unstructured, and it really doesn't have any value. So an owner thinks, I've done a BIM process, I get to the end and you give me all this information, but really, how does that help me? Where am I going? I can't trust it. It doesn't have any long-term value for me. So yeah, if it's going to be useful and it's going to be valued by others and being able to use it to drive, the facilities and maintenance and operations rather than giving them paper, then, we need to make sure that there's a robust quality control process that looks at this data, because otherwise there's a huge gap between, what's in the BIM models and the operational data that's actually required.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that things are changing so fast lately in every industry, right? I feel, especially in ours. But what I think is that it's very necessary to think about a data set that is structured, because that way you can use it over and over again in the future, right? Like, for example, we don't know what use that information might have in the future, you know what I mean? But as long as your data set is structured and can be machine readable, then you can use it after the fact in a few years, maybe when something else came up, you know what I mean? And it will still work because it will still have value and be usable. So,
absolutely, yeah, totally agree
yeah,
with you there. Yeah.
exactly. So, for example, now one of the things that is happening and is super hyped is GIS, right? So, GIS has to do more with geometry information and models, geographical information models, but they are linked to city information models, right? So if you think about it, like in the future, every building that you give a data set to the city, for example, and then there is going to be a much bigger model, city information model, that embeds geographical information and as well as your building information, right? So that's what I'm saying when everything is going so fast that we don't know where it's going to end up in the future. Maybe not so in the long-term future, but more in the short, middle-term future. You know what I mean? So Yeah, I can totally see that happening not long from now. So as long as we have a structured data set of information, we can, in our buildings, we can use that to build something else and reuse it over and over again, especially now with AI. Like you need the data set to be machine readable, right? And to be machine readable, it has to be structured. There is no other way around it.
Couldn't agree more. But I guess as we move forward in this sort of data-driven digital world that we're now in, where AI is, taking such a large role, and a lot of the maintenance and operation, they're going to be doing predictive maintenance
Yeah.
using AI based on how is this pump running? It's losing efficiency, and therefore maybe there's a problem. AI is going to flag it. But to be able to do that and to link all of the various systems together, we have to have this structured, robust data and information, because otherwise it fails. We've got to future-proof the information so, it can be used downstream to enhance its value. And I
Yeah.
think, that does require changes to occur within the way in which we design and build and operate. We need to think in a much more holistic way, that information is created and then it's iteratively built on so that it can be used downstream and does bring value, because there is a cost to doing it. So there is a process where you've got to determine where is the value in what I'm doing and what I'm collecting and what I'm creating and what I'm auditing and checking. You need to understand the information you need to do what. So you build the value.
Absolutely. And that's, as we talked earlier, for the owners are the first ones that have to understand what is the value in the information that they need. I think we talked about this in other podcasts and blogs, but sometimes by default, when someone doesn't actually understand what they need, they tend to ask for everything, right? And everything is not the answer either. Like the real answer is to understand which information holds value for you and ask only for that, because if you ask for everything, chances are, or the risk are, is that you won't get, you won't get nothing, you will get nothing, right? Because it's too much work to produce information and too much money also. So you have to be very strategic about and understand what information is it that you need. And the other thing is that we have to start shifting from project thinking to a more of a life cycle thinking, because when we look at the whole picture of the cost of a building, we can see that the 80% of the building costs in its life cycle is actually the life cycle part, the facility maintenance and operations, right after handover. So that's where the most money of a building is actually spent. So if we can make the whole thing more efficient from design and construction, then the repercussion over the life cycle is huge. It's exponential, right? So that's how we have to start thinking about buildings as information systems rather than just like 2D deliverables or disconnected deliverables, right?
Yeah. Do you think there's a need to sort of explain and educate, say, the designers who create the bulk of the base information for the owner, as to why they're doing it, what the use is, what the purpose is, why it needs to be structured and consistent, and this shift away from building a data set rather than building a set of 2D drawings? Do you think there's an educational piece that needs to be developed?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. In our experience, I feel that education is key to bring that resistance to change barrier down. When working with teams and with people, in my experience, the least the teams understand why they are doing what they're doing, or why they have to develop certain information for you as an owner, the least they understand that, the more risk there is that they don't do it at all. And they push back, delay, right?
So
So
that speaks again to the need to make sure that they understand the requirements before
exactly.
they bid on a project, because it does cost more to build this very robust structured information that's needed and is consistent and is audited to be able to get the gains and the benefits, at the end of the day in the life cycle. So yeah, it's a challenge at times.
It is certainly a challenge. Yeah. And I find that the most challenging is not the software, it's not the process, it's not the workflows, it's people.
Change
People
management.
is a, yeah, people is the most challenging of all. And again, as I said before, education has been proven the more efficient tool to actually work with people and make them help them develop the information that is needed for a project. In our experience, designers are being asked new data points to be added to their models that they were not used to providing before. So that's why also they are very reluctant to give to develop them during design. And the other thing is that especially because they are not the ones reaping the benefits out of providing that information. Like I feel that nowadays we are still in the shift, we are still in the midst of that inflection point, and Beam is certainly the way to go. Is being widespread and everybody's using it, but I feel everybody's still using it kind of like in silos, right? Because not thinking about the whole life cycle of the project, but thinking, okay, I'm maybe a designer consultant or a designer company, and I'm going to use Beam for my internal benefits. Then the same with a general contractor or the trades, like everybody's using it for their own thing. But I feel that we are still working to get that high level holistic view and use of Beam for the whole life cycle of the project. And
Yeah,
sometimes
I think
it's,
we're you're sort of touching on the change management piece
yeah,
here again, whereas the processes, the contracts, the scopes of work are all still very much defined by what the 2D paper output
absolutely.
demanded of us, and we're now moving from delivering paper to delivering data, and there has to be a shift. There has to be a blurring of where the boundaries are between what was known in the paper world to what we need in the data world. So, there's a lot of pieces have to change as we move through and transition to a more seamless digital workflow. I don't know. I think, if we think of closing thoughts here, Valley, we know that the environment is way more now than just the physical building, because we've got all this data that's going to be used and going to be consumed by AI to help us. But, what other feelings or closing thoughts would you have that we need to consider?
No, it's just the fact that the future, in my opinion, is informational. Like more and more, the data is driving the change rather than the geometry. Before it was full the geometry. Now it's informational more and more and more. And I think like in the future, the deliverables are asked are going to be information models, building information systems, not just isolated PDF drawings to these or even just a 3D model, right?
Yeah. No, I
Because of,
totally agree with you. And I think the
yeah.
other thing we need to consider, we've talked about the challenges for the designers, but for the designers, if they do create robust, data rich, consistent models, there's huge advantages for them. It sort of streamlines their workflows and their processes, and it mitigates, on-site conflicts. So, there's huge benefits for all parties once they've actually managed to adapt and change, and realign their thinking to actually working with data as opposed to paper. I don't
Absolutely.
know. Yeah.
I think that the question to close that we can just leave here lingering is like, do we actually have the information needed to operate what we build, right? So that would be my last thought.
Your last thoughts, and I would agree with you. Yes, it's, what are the key pieces of information that the owners need that they should focus on as we transition across from an old way of working to a new way of working. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's been a great conversation. Thanks, Valley.
Thank you.
Anybody that's interested in sort of reading more, then we've posted a series of blogs on LinkedIn. So Summit BIM Consulting, have a look, and let us know if you've got any thoughts, comments, or anything else that you would like to share with us. Thanks very much. And thanks, Valley. Appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you.